So today and over the next few days we're going to be getting my sedan back up and running to daily driving duty. It has been down for a little bit over 3 weeks at this point. That little brass bleed screw decided to strip out the plastic threading in the expansion tank and it's leaking coolant. That's literally all that's wrong with it. It's not that big of a deal, it's just leaking coolant. Originally, when I rebuilt the cooling system, we had a plastic screw on the plastic expansion tank. The Phillips bit on the plastic screw likes to strip out. If you guys have ever had that problem, it sucks. And so I replaced it with a brass bleed screw, which is a fairly common thing to do. The plastic on the expansion tank and the brass have a different expansion rate. So when it gets hot, they expand at different rates, and that just kind of wore down the threads. And now it just skips. It doesn't get tight. And because of that, it leaks. So we are going to be replacing the expansion tank. Along with that, we are going to be redoing my electric fan setup. My genius ass thought it would be a good idea to put the fan control module right here because it's really close to the electric fan. I don't have to run a lot of wires and all that fun stuff. And that really wasn't a good idea because the coolant leaks out of this and it just goes all in this area and it fried the control block. So this is the fan controller control block. So the wiring harness plugs in here, and this is where our relay goes for the fan controller system. So the relay itself is fine. I pulled it apart, but this control block is just fried because it got a lot of coolant in it. If you guys have ever smelled fried electronics, it does not smell very good. So I pulled it apart and it's pretty much just fried. So I got a new fan controller coming. We have a Mishimoto expansion tank. Shout out to the sponsors. Super nice. So we're going to be replacing the expansion tank with that Mishimoto unit, and we're replacing the fan controller. Now initially I'm not going to be redoing the fan controller wiring, but I will be making a new harness for it because this is where we're going to be mounting the fan controller. So that's the mounting plate for it. So the control block sits on top of that. Because I had the fan controller here, I had to run a lot of power wire from here all the way down to the control block. Pretty much all this other stuff was just short wired out of there. We've moved all of that stuff, all of that wiring here, and because it's so long, I condensed it, so I ran it back and forth pretty much and just tied it off so we don't have a ton of excess wiring everywhere. Pretty much the only thing that's long at this point is the actual wires that connect the fan and then temperature sensor that goes into the side of the radiator. So this will work for the meantime. It doesn't look very good and there's a lot of excess wiring, which is the reason I want to redo the fan wiring because we don't need this much wiring. So pretty much all of this can just be condensed, and so we'll just have like some clean, simple wire. We won't have a lot of excess wrapped up. So this is going to work for the meantime. So that'll just plug into the new controller like that, and then it'll work for the meantime while we craft a new harness for it. Ta-da! Alright. So I brought these home from work, which are super nice. These are hose crimps, clamp thing. Squeeze the hose like that. And now it is pinching the hose right there, so we are not going to get any coolant loss from here back, only from that forward. So now when we pull the expansion tank off, we are not going to drain the entire cooling system, pretty much just the cooling system from that clamp forward. Sweet. Alright, you dumb level sensor, please seal. Level sensor is on, hopefully it doesn't leak. We'll find out. So on my other fan controller setup, we modified this base plate here so that I could put 10 millimeter bolts through the sides. So we're just gonna swap the plates real quick. Fits 10 mil bolts, does not fit 10 mil bolts. The new fan controller is in. The secondary air pump is not going to fit with the way the harness is set up and the way it's oriented right now, so we're not going to use it. I'm going to make a little contraption with a lug nut at the end of the hose to block that off, and then we'll be mint. Alright, the reservoir's on. It's pretty much topped off. The fan is hooked up. The probe is hooked up. The ground is hooked up. Our ignition is hooked up. The ignition coils is hooked up. Everything's hooked up. We should be good to start it up. Let it run, bleed it. We'll see how this goes. So now we just gotta wait for it to get hot. I'm not exactly sure what the bleed procedure is for the Mishimoto expansion tank, but I'm sure it's not too different from a regular tank. Aside from not having a bleed screw up top, it's just got a welded stud in there to hold it into the fan shroud. So I did overfill it a little bit, I'm not gonna lie, in compensation for the coolant that lost. I don't think it's gonna burp that much because we blocked it off, but we'll see. The only difference is it has this, so this will purge excess coolant. I'm more worried about the fan controller getting that dialed in and kicking on when I need it to. But we just gotta wait for the radiator and everything to get up to temp fully. I miss this front end. I miss this whole car, bro. I haven't driven this thing in like a month. So we're almost up to temp according to the temp gauge, but we need the radiator to be nice and hot, which is still stone cold, in order for it to control or kick that little guy, which is the fan probe. So while the engine's warm, it's gonna be a while before we're there. So let's put our cap on. Thermostat should be open. The engine coolant temp sensor is reading 219. Our gauge is right in the middle. It's a little bit to the right, but it's always a little bit to the right. I think that's just the cluster. So we should have some flow starting to come through the hoses. So this part of the radiator needs to get nice and hot in order for this fan controller to kick over, to turn the fan module, to turn the fan on. And we're still stone cold over here, which means coolant's just starting to flow. So this side is starting to get warm. This side is still cold. So I bet this fan controller probe is only reading like maybe 100 degrees, if that, while the actual engine's at 200 something. So it takes a while for it to actually get up to temp. So I'm gonna keep an eye on the temp here. Oh, now we're down to 194. Okay. Yeah, so the thermostat opened and it started drawing hot coolant into the radiator, and the temp dropped significantly. So let's make sure that it actually works here. Alright, so we got all the way up to like 225 before I shut it off because the fan wasn't kicking on. And I was trying to spin this to get it to manually kick over, but I think we have some faults in the fan controller system itself, not allowing it to turn on. So pretty much whenever you turn the switch on, whenever you give this 12 volts, it should turn on the fan regardless of what temperature it is. So whatever is going on with it, we're going to figure it out, and we're not going to try and restart it and get the fan to kick on by itself until we can get the fan to spin. So We're gonna do some diagnosis here and see what the deal is. We're probably gonna pin out the harness back here. I swapped the fuse with the fuse from the new fan controller, thinking the fuse was bad, but that didn't fix it. So we're gonna spend some time and do some electrical diag. Success! We figured it out. Okay, so it is now after work. I gave up on this morning because I had to go to work, came back, did some stuff, made some memes, brought home a power probe, and we figured it out. So what happened was, when the other module fried, it fried my power on 12 volts, which is pin number 26. It is a 10 amp. So the top to the camera would be to the right. That red one is to key on 12 volts for the 20 pin right here. So that is this guy. Now, with the Mishimoto fan controller setup, you need to have key on 12 volts from this in order to use the override. So that was not getting 12 volts at all. It key on, it was not key on because the fuse was blown. So if you're troubleshooting one of these, you have to have 12 volts in order for the green wire to work. Without the 12 volts, the green wire does nothing. Now that that is working, if we give it the key on 2, so now if we give that guy 12 volts, alright, hot dog. Now we can actually start dialing in the temperature setting for the fan because the fan works. Sweet. So last night I got the fans to kick on and work. Today we just have to dial it in. Get it up to temp, get it running, get the fan dialed in to where it kicks on and kicks off automatically. So engines don't run at one singular temperature. The temperature kind of fluctuates within a range. So when you're dialing in an electric fan setup, you want it to kick on when it's in the high and shut off when it's in the low of that temperature bracket. Otherwise the fan is never going to come on, or it'll overheat, or it will always be on when it's up to temp, and that's not really ideal because you want to keep it in that temperature range. So we're going to try and get it dialed in. It didn't take that long last time. The worst part is just waiting for it to get up to temp. Sounds beautiful. So again, we are going to be using the scanner to view the coolant temp more accurately than the gauge. So trying to get it to just turn on in the first place, I cranked the dial way over, so it's probably going to turn on super early. And that's kind of what we're just going to have to start smoothing it forward until we find that sweet spot to where it'll work. So we are at 162. The side of the radiator is starting to get warm. And this side is still stone cold. Alright, so the fan kicked on. Really low temp. But this side of the radiator is still, I can still hold my hand on it, it's not even that hot. So we need to dial it back some. But it did kick on automatically. We're getting there. We're at 199. What I really want it to do is shut itself off when it doesn't need it. Yeah, that side's getting pretty hot. So I think around maybe just under 210 is when I'd like to have it come on. And when it gets down to like 203-ish, it'll shut itself off. So it's still a little cold. So I was cleaning up some of my coolant mess and the fan shut itself off. Which means that's it, Chief. We are in the zone. I'm about it. First pull in like a month. Bye.
We are dreaming in the dark. We are nothing more than dust. Search but you stay lost. We are reaching for the stars, but we're made